All right, Joseph, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our preparation for this event, talking about identity and change. We had a couple of sessions just to sort of let people in on what happens behind the scenes. I usually talk to the artist once or twice before. So during those sessions, you told me a bit about these new works, titled New Works, and the two very distinct themes, landscapes and abstract sculptures. Right? And I asked you about the difference between the two themes and what it meant for you. And you mentioned that painting landscapes is a practice of slow change for you as an artist, as it's closer to your identity. While the more abstract works allow you to experience a kind of accelerated change. And feel free to correct me if I didn't quite catch that the first time, but could you say something about that?
Well, I don't think my identity is closer to the landscapes per se, because it's a balanced practice. Yep. So for me, both are equally important. Mm-hmm. But I guess it's allowing two types of practice at once. So the landscapes evolve over time as I gain skills. Yep. But it's always sort of along roughly the same lines. Okay. Whereas with the abstract works, I work sort of in episodes, I guess. I'll work in one area, and then move on to new works. And just be free to change, quite abruptly between different processes of making and exploring different things. Okay. So, that having those two practices, one that I can it's a slow development over a long time, and I can see those results. Yeah. I can see it change, and then the other one is to fast track, exploration and just play and discover, and doing both of them keeps me balanced, so to say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. And so with the landscapes, you've been painting them, 20 odd years or more?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And do you usually sort of use this practice of doing the landscapes concurrent to some abstract works, or is this...
not always.
Not always.
No.
Okay.
So all the landscapes were painted first. Okay. So last year. And to give them time to dry as well. But then after I finished them, I moved on to the sculptural pieces. Okay. The paintings.
And we see this kind of, I guess we can say, digital or cubic element in both the... Is this from a previous show?
Yeah, my last exhibition.
Yeah. In that and in the sculptures themselves. Can you say a bit about that?
Yes. So the previous exhibition, which is these sort of pixelated paintings, they came from I do a lot of computer digital work as studies, working out things like that. Just doing thousands of images, working out visual compositions and how it all works, and it's much quicker than doing it in real life. And these works came out of that, where I just was taking very small samples out of photographs, at the pixel level, so blowing up pixels to, and modifying them and finding a composition I liked. And so I've continued to work with the digital, just work on the computer to create images. And I went from that into creating 3D sculptures in a program, and that's how I got to these sculptures. So I was making them using these sorts of images into boxes and seeing how they worked, and then I thought I'll do it in the real world. So that's how they came into existence. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, good. And I had the pleasure of reading your exegetical work, which is, of some years ago. That was from your doctoral project. And you talk about abstraction in there. So, I'd like to pick out a few themes from that thesis, if that's okay. for us to reflect on. So in staging your research problem, you state a painting is inherently a static object. The spectator's engagement with a painting, however, is an experience that unfolds over time. So in this In Conversation series, we've talked at some length with other artists about the static nature of paintings and the change experienced by the viewer over time. However, I have not inquired too deeply into the change experienced by the artist from one body of work to the next. So with your permission, can we delve into your change today?
Sure.
Yeah. So how would you describe the change you experience as an artist from one body of work to the next?
It's very tricky. A friend of mine described it as like sediment building up on a seabed.
Okay.
You know, or they just pile up. You know, and you sort of, it becomes part of you.
Yeah.
You know, and you learn what you learn from each body of work, how it works, how, you know, how they operate, you know, how they perform as works, and then, you know, you reflect on them afterwards and see things that you don't always see. So it's a very tricky thing to define. Yeah.
I guess even if it's, we'll just kind of play around with it, not necessarily as a definition, but more as your experience with it. I like the imagery, right? This accretion of sediment over time. Have you ever experienced the process as a kind of undoing, almost like a big wave comes in and takes a big gap out of the...
No, but I think it's rare that I actually end up where I thought I may end up. And it's happened several times now, so I'm quite comfortable with that.
Okay.
And it would be somewhat weird if it didn't happen now, sort of thing. But you just have to trust that process, you know. So like, you know, I don't have very clear ideas when I start things, and then you start and there's a lot of failures, and then you get onto a thread, sort of thing, and then you just, you know, go hard on that and really mine it, so to say.
Sure.
And it just happens, you know. And it's a bit daunting at times when you're like, okay, now I've got to start again, you know. And I don't have to, you know. I could, you know, like these are a continuation actually, you know. So there's no rules. It's just, but I like that, like when you're learning new things, it's quite an interesting place to be. Okay. I find it.
And I guess, you know, there's something in that where you appear to be commenting on where the works end up, right? And you kind of get to a point of completion, but upon sort of self-reflecting, do you or have you spent time observing yourself and where you end up at the end of a series?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I just continue.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Maybe that's something to do much later in life. We'll do some Deleuze because, you know, you unpack some Deleuze in your thesis, but in his final book with Guattari, What is Philosophy? He says that's the kind of question that you can ask yourself towards the end of life. So you've got plenty of life left, so maybe what is art and how did I change might not be a question for today, but maybe in sort of 40 years from now.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So look, I'll attempt something which is somewhat difficult, and I've been trying to do this myself and grappling with it for years, which is to make sense of some Deleuzian concepts, right? And because I understand some of these inform your practice. So the first of these concepts, which I touched on a little bit earlier, is identity. So Deleuze leverages the concept of identity to teach us what the concept of difference is not. So identity for Deleuze is fixed. It's not that it's unchanging so much as it is fixed. So for example, between 1993 and 2006, I went by the name Jalaine, with a J in front. And before and after that time, I've referred to myself as Alain. So there was change, but each state was fixed, and the change between the two states seems kind of instantaneous. So would you say, your identity as a painter or as an artist is composed of these fixed states, or do you see it as something more fluid? Or both?
Yeah, I think it has to be both. You need to hold on to something, or but then also it's you need to be open to change.
Yeah.
So I think it's that balancing act for everyone. It's not just like artists.
Sure.
If you don't do new things, you don't grow as an individual. If you don't let go of your identity, so to say, then you don't change. You don't allow yourself to grow. So I think that art is very similar to that. You need to be able to open yourself to new ideas, or allow yourself to go with the artworks. See what they're asking you or saying to you, to change, to grow, to experience new things.
Yeah. And so what would you say have been some of the more fixed elements of the practice? So, maybe Joseph Daws between the years of X and Y.
Yeah, like a pretty firm commitment to oil painting.
Okay.
Is it's at the foundation of it, because it's just such a hard thing to handle. And going back, the landscape is sort of the one thing that I've kept doing the whole time.
Sure.
Yeah, and I will continue to do that. So yeah, that provides an anchor of sorts, to me.
Sure.
Whatever identity I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how about the more fluid aspects, and not necessarily how things might change from one exhibition to the next, but even in between brushstrokes, what is bubbling away there?
It's tricky because like painting's like a non-verbal space. When I paint, so it's a fluid space. The flow, being in the moment, sort of thing. So that's not an issue. That's when you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's the place you want to be.
Okay.
Yeah. But then I guess the variety of abstract practices is it's a freedom, and also it's sort of like, well, it's not me. It's also an excuse, sort of, well, not excuse, but it's I feel more free, and mistakes can be made.
Sure. Is that in the sense that it doesn't really bear on or question those aspects of identity that might be fixed, like Joseph Daws, the landscape painter?
Yeah. To counteract that as well.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Yeah.
And what are some of the previous abstract works, out of curiosity? Because
I did a show of, I was doing monotype prints, so they were very random, just putting paper together, and they're sort of inky blots, and then I enlarged them to be large, big, and painted them meticulously. So it was sort of large images that looked like abstract expressionism, but they weren't really expressionistic. They were made to look like that.
Okay.
So that was one. I did a lot of sort of more fluid, layered abstracts, sort of more fluid space. I'm trying to think. Yeah, there's probably some others in there. These ones, the resolution ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's play with some more Deleuze. So his interest in critiquing these fixed aspects of identity is to draw out his concept of difference. So he says that if we think of difference as the distinction between two fixed states, we miss the point. So difference is not the distinction between fixed states, rather it is this ever-present flux, which you touch on. And this flux is not subject to identity. It overflows all that's representable in identity. So put differently, we are more than what we can ever say that we are, and we are continually in flux. So taking that into account, and the two approaches here with the landscape and the abstract made me sort of think or come up with these concepts of slow flux versus quick flux. Did those terms speak to you at all?
Yes, yeah. There's various registers at operation, in operation at any point with any painting. You know, you've got very formal considerations, you know, which I place quite highly. And then you've got, you know, the symbolic elements, like visually, what's going on within the paintings. And then you've got like the process that made the paintings is readable as a, you know, how is that done? Does that contribute to the reading of the work? So there's a lot going on, you know,
Sure.
and I tried to avoid saying anything about the works.
In both?
Yeah, like you know, you don't have to read anything to look at it. And everyone's going to take those things on differently. So I think, you know, a painting for me is something that you live with, not just sort of look at for 30 seconds in an art gallery, you know.
Okay.
And it's that long-term engagement with something where you see yourself change in the process of living with it.
Okay.
I find that interesting with paintings. So I don't know, like I've spent, say that painting like this, I've spent a long time looking at it, at the composition of it and how it flows, you know, and how it works. And I don't know how anyone else sees it, you know.
Okay.
But I try and imbue the landscapes with quite a strong composition, sort of on that formal level, because it's sort of it's foundational for the image. And then there's, you know, you can read into it the symbolic level, you know, how far you want to go with that, you know. So I think things reveal themselves, like painting's a slower art, I think, than some other things. And they do take time, you know, for us to see them, to get to know them. Like a good movie, you know, you can watch it a few times and still see stuff. So it's sort of us that changes.
Sure, and I guess what I'm hearing, and maybe, you know, in my preconceptions before the conversation, I was thinking of the landscapes more as something of slow flux and the abstract more as something of quick flux, but it doesn't seem that way. Like you could potentially still have a kind of slow change with one of these sculptural works as a viewer, or...
Maybe, yeah. I think these works are more, not shallow, but they're more minimal, I would say, you know. But then on the other side of that, you have something comes with that, which is a presence or something, I think, in that minimalism.
Sure.
You know, so that's just what they are. That's the nature of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to sort of touch on the abstract and, you know, picking off a bit more of Deleuze, which came out of your thesis. So we talked about this concept of habit, which Deleuze encapsulates in his concept of repetition, from difference and repetition. So he says, repetition changes nothing in the object repeated, but does change something in the mind which contemplates it. So this quote seems, you know, rather innocuous, but you know, there's something in it. So for example, you make many brushstrokes as an artist. Each one could be considered a single brushstroke conceptually. So you repeat many brushstrokes over your career as an artist. So nothing changes in the conceptual object. You're repeating brushstrokes. But it does change something in you in terms of how you might contemplate or conceive of yourself as an artist or the work. And it certainly changes something for us as viewers of your work. So I guess, can you say something about the place of habit and repetition in the practice?
Yeah, so, well, it's essential, you know, just for existing,
Right.
for being, you know, we're all creatures of habit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can't get by without it. But, and yeah, to paint, you know, it's really nice to be able to mix a colour without thinking about it. You know, it's like I was in a band once and I was playing bass guitar, and I knew I'd never be any good because I had to think about playing,
Right.
and I couldn't enjoy playing because I had to think about it because I wasn't good enough.
Sure.
to be on that plane. But with painting, and plein air painting's a good one for it. You'd learn to do things without thinking. Just mix a colour and you've got it. And that's good. Life would be really hard if I couldn't do that.
Yeah, sure.
So there's and all those things are really important because that's like brush mileage. Getting yourself to that point where you're fluent at your trade, craft. But then the habit, I guess, the other end of it is the avoiding the pitfalls of falling into mannerism and habit as an artist.
Yeah, sure.
And being repetitive. I've painted this mountain several times, so I'm being repetitive, but I don't care on that one. But over the long term, you want to. I think that I always try and check myself in terms of those habits.
It's interesting, what you pick out. And I think that's the nuance, right, in Deleuze's philosophy around habit, because as soon as it's a habit of concept, like this mountain, which is, I think, is that the same mountain?
Yeah.
When we think of it conceptually, we kind of miss the point. But the habit you touched on initially seems, highly valuable. This habit of almost embodying something that, wasn't able to happen for you with the bass guitar, but has been able to happen with mixing colors and painting, right? And I guess language can get in the way sometimes, because we're using the same word, but in some instances it's fluid, it's really kind of beneficial, and in other instances it's cliche, right? And so, how do you, and this might not necessarily be advice for anyone seeking to be an artist, but for anybody doing anything, how does one harvest the former type of habit, the habit that leans into mastery, and avoid the habit that leans into cliche?
I don't know. It depends what you do. Sort of. I think that's a manual skill sort of thing. And other people, like, I don't know, someone who studies law, they have to remember cases and cases, and precedences, and and it's just a totally different thing. But for them, that space is what they inhabit and fill their mind with and remember.
Yeah.
So that becomes fluid for them. They don't have to reach for a book, or if they do, they know which book. You know what I mean? So I think it's just doing something a lot sometimes.
It is.
As simple as that, because you will get better at it.
Yeah.
In terms of like flow, that sort of thing, it's like, I think all performing artists, sports people, it's a variety. Just driving your car can be like that. But then you could be too much in the flow and crash, not paying attention. I don't know. It just depends on the profession.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's maybe a question for me to take away, but this fine line between mastery and cliche.
And it's a tricky one because
to be continued.
It's unavoidable anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Even if you try to avoid it, that's the catch.
Yeah,
so to say.
So there was a quote in your thesis from Deleuze: "Something in the world forces us to think. This something is an object not of recognition, but of a fundamental encounter." And then you go on to say, "An artwork functions on various registers of consciousness, including the rational, the sensory and affective, and the socio-historical. An artwork posits a fundamental encounter and an object of recognition to some degree." So do you recall a fundamental encounter with a work of art? Not necessarily your own, just,
Yeah.
Yeah, can you share that with us?
I remember it was a print of a work of art. It was a Cézanne print. I remember once, and it's a very, very complex image, and I had it on my wall in my living room when I was at art school. And I used to look at it quite a lot because it's a really amazing painting. But at one point, it was just like the whole painting just like an internal space. Everything just sort of lined up in terms of the chunky sort of composition thing and made this sort of internal space within the painting. And that was like something very unexpected. And it happened with some Picasso sort of works as well, the early Cubist works. Things like that, are interesting things, that happen with pictorial space. But like, it's looking at a painting is it's still a thing that we know. You know what I mean? It's not a fundamental. It's not a brand new fundamental encounter. Like each painting's different, so it is. But we're conditioned to look at paintings because we've done it before, and so it's a.
And I guess it's breaking those habits of looking or those patterns that is part of the challenge of approaching a piece.
Yeah, and as a painter, it's like how do you negotiate that engagement? Because we all look for meaning in everything, even if it's like clouds that look like something. So we all look at things wanting meaning. So it's quite nice just to like totally resist that sometimes,
Yeah, sure.
and not have any meaning. But yeah, I think a lot of my thought processes in terms of what I'm painting and how the painting finishes is around how I expect people to look at the works, and sometimes interfering with that, or slowing down that search for an endpoint, because I don't know, like if nothing's explained, then you have to do the work yourself, so to say, and that's what it's all about.
And so coming back to that Cézanne, after this encounter, what did that change for you?
Well, sort of the way I looked at things, paintings, the complexity that can be built into a painting, on the variety of levels that it can operate on, and actually how long it takes to get to know a painting,
Sure.
Visually. I spent hours looking at it, and then one day sort of things clicked. Yeah. So that's what I got out of it.
Okay.
Like how,
And have you had a similar encounter, or not necessarily similar encounter, but a fundamental encounter with any of your own works over time?
Well, I don't know.
I mean,
it's an odd definition because every encounter is fundamental.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So I don't, we live with my artworks, and it's nice to sort of do that, and see them over a long time, and different moods, see them in different moods and things. So yeah, nothing strikes me immediately. Yeah.
It seems, I mean, these encounters, they can be incremental, like the Cézanne, you're looking at it and things are kind of building up slowly over time, and then at this one point it's like falling off a cliff and something fundamental or large happens. But I was just curious, and look, I've put my name on for the painting at the front of the oranges, and so I'm looking forward to living with that one, and we'll see if a fundamental encounter comes about. So, what can you tell us about that one? Because that's a bit different. It's not landscape. It's obviously still life.
It's the first still life I've done for many years, and it was. I just wanted to do it. Okay. Just to, for the experience of doing it, what I learned out of doing it, and it's totally, what's the word, like contrived. I spent a lot of time setting up that composition. Yeah, and spent a lot of time painting it. It was quite very enjoyable painting to do, and yeah, I'm not going to like talk about it too much.
You'll leave it to me too.
Yeah. I don't want to spell it out.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So, coming back to your thesis, you write about visual abstraction, or you say visual abstraction can function as a form of resistance that counters the intentionality and ideology of information and language. So, switching out now to thinking about abstraction, can you say more about that, about the resistance?
Yes. Well, for me, just getting away from non-verbal. Like being non-verbal is a space I work well in. I find words are like writing. It's very difficult. I find it hard, and even like expressing things is I think fraught at times if it's about certain topics. But painting is not that. So. And some painting is, or some art is, and it's very, like it's political and it's very clear, and how you're meant to interpret it is being presented as very clear. And I don't want to make art like that. So I want to, slow down that experience with the work. And just operate on a non-verbal level, where the person just reflects on the work themselves.
Okay.
And it's just like it's finding that sort of balance between like figuration and abstraction.
Sure.
And it's a zone there where things can be, laden with sort of symbolism and sort of allusions to other things, but they're not clearly defined.
Okay.
And it's a very rich area. It's like I think sort of the meanings can overflow, and depending on who you are and how you read them, everyone reads them differently when they're sort of ambiguous.
Okay.
So you can sort of steer it, I think.
Sure.
that people do read it a certain way, things.
And I wonder, in the absence of placing intentionality, ideology, and information in the work, is there a risk that the viewer just kind of brings their own intentionality, ideology, and information in viewing it, right? So then you kind of get this forestalling of the abstract as resistance, because the viewer's like, oh well, I'm not being given meaning, but I'm just going to impose mine.
Yeah, but don't we all do that anyway?
Yeah, we do. We
we do that to everything.
Yeah.
just by thinking about it. So no, it's out of my hands. I can't do anything about it.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was trying.
I just make it. Everyone else thinks whatever they want to think.
Yeah.
It's not my responsibility.
Fair enough. I'm curious about perhaps this liminal space where we might be able to short circuit that. But I agree. I mean, it's far too big a responsibility to take on other people's intentionalities and ideologies.
No, but some artists are very clear about that. And they make points in their art that are about certain things. And that's fine.
Yeah.
That's great. But I'm not making like major points, so I'm not really worried if anyone misinterprets. Like, how can you misinterpret a painting?
Yeah.
I like one of these ones anyway.
Sure.
Because there's not really. I'm not like It's not deep criticism.
I understand.
So to say.
Yeah. What else do I have? Maybe one sort of final question or two-part question. What changed for you in producing these new works, and how would you say your identity has been disrupted?
Well, no, it hasn't been disrupted.
Okay.
No, it's all good. It's okay.
You're making me nervous.
Like, no, it was great. I've really enjoyed doing the sculptural works, and I think I'll pursue them.
Further?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And see where that goes.
Okay.
It's been fun just to see things in 3D and how that works, and playing with the form. So that was good, and I'm really happy with like how the landscape paintings went. So I'll probably give that a rest and try something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of painting.
Great. So it sounds like there's a new opening here potentially with the sculpture. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I'm going to keep following that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much for talking with me today, and for
Thank you.
Congratulations on your show.